So today we're going to make our grocery bag dispenser, and we're going to start off with our strips that we have pre-cut. So first of all, we're going to pin the first two with right sides together. So this right side will go down on the other right side, and we match the edges and pin. Pin's about 3 inches apart. And I always like to put the pin on the stitching line. Just makes the next step easier. Sometimes I have students who are not happy about sewing a straight line, so what I will do is just draw a pencil line with a ruler along the stitch line, especially for children, and it just makes it that much easier. Okay, so I'm just going to sew along the pin line. Just like that. Okay, and now I'm going to take this over to the ironing board and iron the seam open. Okay, so to iron the seam open, it's easier first to finger press it, which means basically just doing that with your fingers just to open up the seam before you put the iron on there. And I like to put my iron on steam, just gives a nicer crease. And just make sure the seam is nice and open. I like to flip it and just give it a quick iron on the other side too. So we're going to continue this way, right sides together with the next strip. And you can do it on either side, but you need to make sure the two edges match. So again, pin along the stitch line with pins about 3 inches apart. Again, if you're not sure about sewing the straight line, you can draw the line on here, and then I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and stitch it. Okay, so same here. I'm going to take that over and iron as I go along. So again, finger press the seam open and then iron. Okay, so you just continue in that way until you have all your strips sewn together, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 11. There's 11 strips there, so exactly the same. Put the right sides together, pin, stitch, iron. It's a great way to, it's like stage 1 of the easy patchwork, and another great way to have beginners just get comfortable with the machine and get used to straight stitching. Just trim off any of those loose threads. And so the next thing we're going to do, just put that to one side for a moment, is our the strip across the middle we're going to do with the letters on for bags. So you take your Wonder Under or fusible paper and you draw out your letters. I'm going to write bags on mine. So you draw out the letter, make sure it's backwards so that it's comes out the right way on the fabric when you iron this onto the back. You take the backing paper off, like that, and you iron it onto the back of your fabric. Okay, so I'm just going to iron that onto there. See the back. And make sure you turn the steam off for this. The paper doesn't like the steam. Okay, so, and you can feel when the paper has fused to the fabric. Okay, so then I'm going to just cut out the letter. And then to get into the little, the middle of the bees there, I just do a little nick. And again, I just fold it over and do like a little nick in there. Little tricky, these small bits. But that's how you do the letters, and just, you can do all four of, like in this case I'm doing the BAGS. Okay? So then when you've got that far, and you're happy with the shape of the letter, you just peel off the backing. Which is also a little tricky. You've got to get your nail in the corner like that. And now you've got slightly tacky on this side. So what you do is, this is my strip for the middle, and as you can see I've placed all my letters which are going to get ironed on. So this would be the 4 of them I've done. And you just play around with them until you're happy with the position of them. And then you're going to take this over to the ironing board and iron those on, and that will release the glue and make it bond together. Okay, so one thing I should say about this is that this fusible paper that I'm using, you can use, there's 2 different types. There's a semi-permanent or a permanent one. And the semi-permanent, which is this one, means that I can use the sewing machine to also stitch over it. It's almost like a temporary bond, just to hold it in place while you stitch it on. So now all the letters are in place, I'm going to use a zigzag stitch on my machine to applique them on. And I'm going to use a nice fun colour just to give it a bit more definition. So I'm going to put mine on a zigzag stitch. You need to adjust the settings on your machine depending on what kind of machine it is. So just lower the needle in where you want to start the stitching. And when you get to the curve, you just leave the needle in, raise the foot and just pivot slightly. And again, I'm going to do it there. You get used to doing that pretty smoothly. And it's on the outside of the curve that I pivot. it just might be a good idea to practice before you go for the real thing. Almost there. There we are. So I'm going to, as you can see, it's a little bit gathered up. I'm going to take it over to the iron, give it an iron just to make it all nice and smooth. Okay, so next step is that we're going to attach this to the main piece of fabric for the bag dispenser. So we're going to put a hem, a ½ inch, well, like a ¼ inch hem on the long sides. So to do that, I'm going to fold over, take it over to the ironing board and press. That's one side. Do the other side. Okay. So I'm going to pin this in place on the main fabric. Again, stitches, or pins rather, about 3 inches apart and fairly close to the edge, which is where I'm going to stitch. Like that, and I'm going to stitch this in place. And the other side. Okay, and we're just going to trim any loose threads. I'll just trim that little extra bit there. Okay, so at this stage, if there's any other design work that you want to do, you can add it onto there. But now I'm going to assemble the bag, and to do that, I'm first going to make a casing for the elastic. So we are going to make a hem at the top and the bottom. We're going to do a 1/2 inch and another 1/2 inch, and then we're going to iron it. So 1/2 inch, another just slightly over 1/2 inch, because the elastic we're using is 1/2 inch. Okay, I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. Okay, so we need to pin both of these edges. And I always like to imagine which way the fabric is going to go in the machine and then pin it so the pins face upwards. So if you imagine the bigger part is always going to fall out of this side of the machine, my pins are facing up. So I'm going to flip it and do the same at the other side. This is something that you'll figure out with experience, and it just makes life a lot easier. Okay, so I'm going to take this to the machine and stitch it as close to the edge as possible. So that's one. Same at the other side. Okay, so both top and bottom are stitched. And now we need to thread in our elastic. So you have 2 pieces of elastic, and the shorter one is going to go at the bottom and the longer one is going to go at the top. That means that the bag is looser at the top for the bags to go in, and then for the dispenser at the bottom, just stops them from falling out of the bag. So I have this gadget which is really handy, and it's just it threads the elastic through. If you don't have one of these, you can just use a large safety pin and just thread it through. So I'm going to take this, put it through like that, and that is my small one, yep. And the trick is I don't want to lose the elastic when it gets inside. So when I get to this end, I'm going to hold on to it and put a safety pin in, just to hold it at the end. Right? So I have the elastic in place there. I'm going to put the safety pin in a little bit further up because I'm going to stitch over this end with the machine. Okay, so now we know that's not going anywhere. You can pull this through. Whoa, that was close. So again, it actually came off my stick, but it's right here, which is where we want it. So again, we're going to put a safety pin in there. Like that. So I'm going to do that with the other end too. This is a great tool, something I use often, like if I'm putting ribbon in, or in a drawstring bag, or elastic in pajama pants. Saves a lot of time. Maybe I shouldn't have spoken so soon. There. Just with the seams in this, there's like little bits that it can get stuck on. A bit more wiggling. There we are. Okay. So again, just get that up in through there. Okay, so pull it. Put your safety pin in. And don't worry if it takes you several goes to do it. Sometimes you lose it halfway and you have to pull it out and start again. It can be frustrating. There, so it should look something like this. So now I'm just going to, on the machine, go over each end just to make sure the elastic isn't going anywhere. I just went forwards and backwards a little bit, just a few. Make sure it's secure. Last one. Okay, now I can take the safety pins out. And the last thing to do is to sew it together, and I'm going to insert a little ribbon hanger on it too. So you need to fold it right sides together and pin matching the center strip that you put on. And making sure the edges match. Okay, and the other thing is to insert the ribbon at the top. So we're going to sew this with a nice 1/2 inch seam. I always do a few back stitches to start off with, just to secure it. You might have to just help the elastic bit through the machine because it's extra thick. Okay, so just keep going. and just hold the bottom bit together when you've taken the last pin out. And again, I'm going to do 2 sets of reverse stitches there, just because that is the part that's going to be used most. Okay. So we have a little bit of trimming to do with the threads. I'm going to trim those bits of elastic off too. They were just bits that were sticking, like excess bits. And then you're going to flip it around. And there you have your grocery bag dispenser, and I think that's going to make a really bright and colourful addition to any kitchen.